almost a year since President Julius Maada instructed the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to fully implement the recommendations in the government's white paper following the conclusion of the commissions of inquiry that looked into corruption issues of the previous administration. Citizens are now demanding to know the state of the implementation of the white paper that recommended the confiscation of properties and accounts frozen of some previous government officials. To look into this, we're joined by Honorable Bami Chidi, who is an analyst, social and political commentator, and he has always been around to ensure that he gives us his view on national issues. We are also expecting Lawrence Williams, social and media analyst, to be part of the conversation, and we are supposed to get Mohammed Elba from the Ministry of Information and Communications, but unfortunately, according to our producer, he has turned us down. But Honorable Bami Chidi is with us in the studio. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning,
sir. Good morning and welcome.
How are you?
Right. I'm pretty sure we should be getting news of how many houses have been confiscated, how many accounts would have been frozen, and especially when about 102 names were given immediately after that pronouncement by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to the Inspector General of Police, those people should not be allowed to leave the country. But since then, we've not had anything about the implementation of the white paper. Let us have your thoughts on that.
Thank you very much, Samuel. The reason they set up the Commission of Inquiry was some of the lackings of financial and good governance, lack of good governance that allowed the state to lose money by collecting, they say, illegal wealth. But now we have gone through the inquiry and government has come up with its own white paper. And then within the due process, you have an appeal.
Right.
And then the government made I think the president had an extension of another 90 days. Whilst they were putting the papers for the appeal till the judiciary set up the appeal court to look into the matter. And from that point on, you are talking about confiscation. Because of due process, that was the lack of due process that got them to land in this condition. If they are following due process, whether financial, constitutional thing, they wouldn't have landed this country. So this is an eye-opener. We should concentrate on good governance. So if we are looking at good governance from that point of view, there is an appeal going on. Let us wait for the appeal before you do something. But you can't just take and seize somebody's property. It's the right for you to appeal. And you have threefold: appeal and then Supreme Court.
Right. As you talk about due process, the commissions of inquiry had the power of the High Court, so their decisions were binding. And the government was going to implement fully the recommendations because the decisions taken there had the powers of the High Court. And so the government wanted that to be implemented fully as the President instructed his Attorney General and Minister of Justice. And during the process of implementation, we've seen persons of interest have been appealing. They've gone to the appeals courts. They've been making their cases. But the government is not coming out with information as to where we are as a nation, because a lot of money was invested into the commissions of inquiry. The process had generated so much interest from members of the public who were keen on issues of accountability and transparency, especially when the aim for establishing the commissions of inquiry were to do financial probity and things like that.
Definitely, Samuel. Look at this thing again. You are talking about due process and good governance. The problem hinges on good governance.
Right.
And good governance have rules and regulation. So if you are saying it has the power of the High Court, so you have the power to appeal against that decision. And that is what is going on as of now. So you can't ask the government now to come up with a statement. That would be premature. And even discussing it till now, it's sub judice because the appeal is on at the appeals court to see some of this recommendation. Don't forget, you are talking about human rights of individual.
Yes.
And if you're going to adhere to the human rights of individual, allow the due process to go on.
But is it safe to say that the government still can come out with a statement informing the public the position of where we are with regards to this process? Because as we speak, a lot of people are not sure what is going on, if anyone has appealed, what's the status, how many have gone through the process, how many is concluded, no information whatsoever.
I think they did that, but I'm not even brief for the government. But you tell me that I was in paper that about 92 appeal has been filed. And then if the government is coming out periodically to tell you, the appeal process is going on. And then it's the way they should have reported it, but the point is the government can't come up with a categorical statement. They have come up with a recommendation, and they are appealing against this recommendation. If we appeal against the recommendation, let us wait for the outcome of the appeals court, and then the government will come with a statement. But I think, as of what I looked at my phone yesterday, I think the Attorney General will be on a press briefing or something to tell maybe the status of this, because I remember the principal assistant to the government was calling about confiscating property within a month. Well, I think that was too early and premature when there's a due process.
But just quickly, but let's welcome Lawrence Williams, a media and social analyst. Welcome to Vasho Lawrence.
Yeah, good morning, Samuel.
Morning and welcome.
Like Stella asked, Honorable Bamichide, like Stella asked this question, I'm going back to it. From the outset, when the SLPP took over, the SLPP instituted a transition team that came out with a report. That report, many advocates said it indicted and convicted members of the previous administration, and the recommendation, one of the imperative recommendations in that report led to the setting up of a judge-led commissions of inquiry. And those things were published, they were broadcast in full view of the general public. So the general public was informed about happenings into the entire process of probing into the activities of the previous administration, up to when the reports were being handed over to President Julius Maada Bio and the white paper, and up to the time he instructed the Attorney General to fully implement. So if people have gone to the appeals court and the process of appeal is ongoing, is it also wrong for the government to come out and tell the people of Sierra Leone that the 90 days have expired, given by the president for actions to be taken, properties that were supposed to be confiscated have not been done because the people have appealed, and we have to follow the due process? Is that a wrong move to take in a good governance strategy, especially when we all talk about transparency in governance?
Very interesting question. How can you see something now and you are appealing against it? So allow the due process. Government has made its own recommendation. This property is confiscated, you are allowed to pay such and such amount. That's fine. That's what the white paper says. You accept the white paper and you come up with a recommendation that is a holistic cabinet review, and come up with a recommendation. And this recommendation too is subject to appeal, because that was why at the beginning they were questioning the legality of the forming of this of this information. And so if you are trying to tread on good governance, don't forget each individual have their own human rights. You just can't trample with them. That is why the government is allowing the appeal to go on. And the process of having that appeal took some time in forming that appeal session to look into that appeal case. So within 2-3 weeks from now, they'll be coming with their own judgment. So they don't preempt.
Lawrence, is there an information gap on issues surrounding the recommendations of the white paper?
I think there is so much bureaucracy. I could recall some time ago when the principal legal advisor in the Office of the Attorney General briefed the press.
The consultant.
Yes, the principal legal consultant, yes. And he shrewdly concealed very pertinent information relating to the implementation of the white paper and its recommendations. And again, I think that yes, there has also been some kind of information gap as well, and the government seemed to be somewhat or somehow reluctant, to brief or engage the public on this very important issue. I don't know whether they are so inundated with the Billion Gate scandal the missing billions revealed by the African Express, or rather there are some form of negotiations going on behind the scenes that we don't know of or they don't want us to be aware of. But one thing I will always say is that since the voucher gate, the squander gate, the billion gate that characterized the Stevens era, to the Ebola gate, and to the present situation, there has not been any deliberate attempt to fully implement, recommendations contained in white papers. Commissions of inquiry, recommendations emanating from commissions of inquiry. I was just going to that,
because when this government took over, with the commissions of, with proceedings in the commissions of inquiry made public, going back to 2007 when the APC instituted a commission of inquiry, nothing came out, nothing to the public, and this one came to the public. But in terms of implementation and going forward, people are now in the dark. So is this a strategy to say, oh no, we made a mistake, we should have gone quiet about this and just hold people to ransom? Like, for example, you have a very senior APC official like Dr. Sylvia Lanka Blyden saying that the former president is been blackmailed, so he cannot come out on issues. So with all of these things in play, was it a mistake the SLPP government made by going public with the entire commissions of inquiry thing?
I don't think it was a mistake. It's the responsibility of any government to probe its predecessor if there are reasonable justifications that some high-level corruption took place during the predecessor's regime. And mind you, this government campaigned on the promise of eradicating corruption, on the promise of a new direction. And what has been happening since 2018 to date is a kind of politicization of the fight against corruption.
Right.
And that has not helped us in any way. And we've seen folks who, before this time, while they were in opposition, hailed the Auditor General, for example, used audit reports to cast aspersions, cast blames, and the rest of it. But now, when they are in governance, they are now discarding. There have been some form of dissension towards the audit report, particularly that of the 2019 annual audit and the COVID-19 audit reports. And there have been increasing attacks of recent times against the Auditor General herself. There are so many issues at play here. And it signifies or implies that this government is not sincere in the fight against corruption. But coming back to the implementation of the white paper, the process is, one, after the commission has ended its probe and presented its report, the government looked at it and also came up with their own recommendations. And of course, we were all there when the president instructed the Attorney General to ensure that he fully implements the recommendations contained therein.
Yeah.
At that time, my publication, Freetown Post newspaper, put out an online petition calling on all Sierra Leoneans to back up the process on the grounds that the implementation of those recommendations are done within the ambit of the law. That is to say, giving individuals the fair and equal opportunity to appeal against whatever judgment they feel that they feel aggrieved about.
Isn't that the process that is ongoing at the moment?
Oh yes, certainly I'm aware that the appeals process is ongoing. But mind you, some time ago, the principal legal consultant informed us that the government has taken steps to confiscate about 20 properties of 20 individuals.
Right.
And he could not release the names of those individuals. You don't fight corruption that way.
So if you say the government is not sincere in the fight against corruption, where does this then leave the government? Because this was one of its major campaign tools during the election process. And for a process that was televised and garnered so much attention in and out of Sierra Leone, where does this leave the integrity of especially the president?
Well, I think the integrity of the office of the president, to start with, has been questioned as we speak.
In what sense?
From the Afrobarometer report, which identifies the office of the president among one of the 4 most corrupt institutions in Sierra Leone, to the revelations by the Africanist press, even investigations opened up by the ACC on the office of the First Lady, and so many other issues. These are all issues that point towards one direction, that there is massive corruption within this administration. And the office of the president cannot absolve itself from those allegations.
Is that having an impact in the implementation of the recommendations of the white paper? Does that have some sort of a bearing on the process that we see now ongoing?
It is my opinion that the administration could be, should I say, frightened to fully implement those recommendations contained therein, because they have come up, instances of corruption or allegations, very grave allegations of corruption, pointing directly to that very high office in Sierra Leone. So if you are to lead by example, who comes to equity must come with clean hands. And so if their hands have been soiled now, then you wonder whether Alibaba has the rights to prosecute the 40 thieves for corruption. But the people of this country are the very ones that will continue to suffer. What we've undergone, what we've been going through in the last 3 years, quite burdensome. And this government has a responsibility to set a very good precedent. We want to see the full implementation of those recommendations contained in the white paper, so as to set a benchmark for successive governments, even for this current regime, because a post-Madabio presidency, a post-Madabio commission of inquiry will be very, very intriguing, to say the least. And if you do not set the precedents now, it could be somewhat challenging for successive government to probe this particular SLPP government. We want to see individuals convicted, as indicated in the white paper already, which is a judgment of the High Court. But if the appeals process is fair and open and transparent, the government should have allowed, media coverage, televised coverage of those appeals.
As it were done in the commissions of
in the commissions of inquiry.
Sorry,
I can tell you why before you come in,
Yes,
Honorable.
yeah.
Look at the British legal system. Before this time, I suppose, no cameras were allowed in the courtroom. But that system within the British legal system has changed. You go to England, high-profile cases are televised. Even Ghana, recently, the election petition trial was televised. In doing so, you build an atmosphere of trust. And you also prompt those presiding over such matters to uphold integrity because the public is watching.
In our call for upholding this integrity, do we have the capacity as a nation to actually go through that process of upholding this said integrity? I ask this because we've seen across the world where in incidents of corruptions where we see former presidents being jailed. If that was to happen in Sierra Leone, do we as a people have the capacity to manage the outcome of such a situation if we are to go according to the recommendations?
If there are substantial evidences that could warrant the conviction and sentence of former presidents, definitely we need to set that example. But given the political tension, the regional and tribal division that has widened in the last 3 years, I doubt whether we are ready for that. But nobody fights. Nobody can actually succeed in fighting against a sitting government, especially if the government, upholds the rule of law,
right,
acting within the confines of the law. If the former president, we all know how the ACC went after him. Oh, if he does not come, we're going to arrest him. If he does not this, we're going to do this, and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, he cooperated. Yeah? But you want to ask, since that interview, right, since the last interview with the president, how far has the ACC gone? There is no response coming forth. So you begin to wonder whether that was a political move, whether it was actually meant to scapegoatize the former president to increase Sierra Leone's chances for the MCC and all of that stuff, or whether in fact the ACC has evidence against the former president. If so, why not? That should be, one key investigation that the ACC should focus its energy on. A question
all for the ACC. Let's bring in Honorable Bamichidi. He had wanted to come in when Lawrence was submitting the fact that these commissions of inquiry that have ended, they appeared as if they had political undertones in the guise of us fighting corruption. But the SLPP, according to him as a government, does not come out to be fair in its approach to getting the process open to every Sierra Leonean. How then do we link that with good governance and take into consideration the indices about corruption, Transparency International, excellence, Sierra Leone, the fight against corruption, Afrobarometer, we're doing awesome. The MCC scorecard, fantastic. So we are on top.
Thank you very much. But let me answer what my interjection was. But at the end of the day, he clarified it. Right. We're in the English system. In America, they have all this televised court procedure. And if England too is trying to adjust, then maybe with time we will adjust. But for now, you don't have television cameras in there.
England has adjusted a long time ago. Ghana has just followed suit. Kenya has also taken that path.
Listen to what I said?
If South Africa has taken that path, we all within the British legal system, Honorable. Sorry to interject, but my point was, England has actually,
but the point is,
improved.
You are going by, listen to me, you are going by rules laid down before. That was the setting before. So it's as time goes by, you can make the necessary adjustment.
Rules set up left behind by the very colonial administration.
Again, that's not the problem when it comes to the dispensation of justice in Sierra Leone, because we feel and we know we've seen that the activities of the judiciary is always shrouded in secrecy. How then do we open that to widen the space of transparency in
that we have
things?
to go going back to this showmanship, like the Perry Mason kind of thing. Now, because of the advancement in information flow,
Right.
that to get confidence of people, then they started open up. So at the same time, we should be looking at these things so that we can make the necessary adjustment to fit in modern culture. I'm not saying they didn't do it, but the law is, we are going by due process. If the law is from this point in time, we will be advocating for us to open up our space, which we haven't opened up yet. So we have to go with what we have now. That's what they have, the law. That is what we are going to buy. Second now, you see, the thing is, sometimes we become too emotional. Oh, they don't see fire brigade kind of tendency. At the end, when you start looking at it now, there may be some gray areas which can be substantiated. So that is why the appeal process now is on to look at the merits of the legality based on facts. That's the opportunity. That is why I said in governance you have due process. And if the due process is going on, because they ask you certain questions which will be clarified by law. If it doesn't clarify by law, then the government will confiscate your property. But let us wait for the outcome of the appeal.
No, but when you have no clue if it is actually going on, or if this is a process that is being either undermined or just left to time, because we know in Sierra Leone, after a while, people tend to forget and move on to other things.
But
if this is the semblance or the perception people are having, isn't it safe to say we do have an information gap from the government?
Definitely, there's an information, the flow. Because, you see, when the thing started, don't forget, you always have to have politics in these things. You came up on the premise that you're going to fight corruption. But then corruption to fight back. But the point, you can't eradicate it, but put measures in place. Because it's because we don't follow due process that led this, what they call it, malpractices that went on. So if you are there, you've seen the mistakes, try to correct it. But as you look, as you were saying, what was criticized seemed to be happening. So which means, is there a flaw in our own system in the terms of accountability? Because for every flaw in the system, you can correct it. And the inquiry, when we looked at it, was some of the questions were asked. And if you notice, certain people had to get away with, you see, when they came out, oh, I'm an active man. Then at the same time, within the evidence adduced at the inquiry, some of them were minimized. You see, but then the number was too large.
Quickly, before we take few messages, both of you can have a bite on this. It came out clearly that some previous government officials were corrupt. Some were paying back to the ACC monies which they stole. So it was established that some of them were involved in corruption. So they were paying back the states the monies they stole. Accusations are currently ongoing in terms of corruption in this current regime, but the system is saying we are prompt, we're investigating those allegations, and we await the bodies that are charged with the responsibility of investigating those allegations and come back to us. In terms of looking at the findings of the commissions of inquiry and implementation of the white paper, do you see it personally, do you see it as a political tool to gain political edge over another party, especially when elections are coming? Or do you see it as a sincere fight to weed out corruption and ensure the state benefits out of this entire process?
That is why the anti-corruption, I'll answer that question, but looking at it from the point of anti-corruption.
Yes.
Anti-corruption went into negotiations with some of these people. That what we're looking at is to gain back some of this money back to the state coffers.
Right.
And some people have been paying. But they should be telling us some of these things. But they're too shrouded in secrecy, which means there's a stopgap situation, that information is not very constant.
Right.
Because if they are paying, and if you think, instead of, some were charging me 100, and I think my Mahmoud and all these kind of people were made an arrangement with the anti-corruption. So anti-corruption is looking at it from two ways. Instead of prosecute, let us make sure we get some of this money back to the state coffers. So that's where we should get all this information. But then, after that point, then you have this appeal process going on. So it makes we, the citizen, look confused. Because how can you appeal and then you are paying to anti-corruption? You see, so it's very confusing.
Yeah, because there were some of the cases that were actually referred to the anti-corruption for further investigation.
Yeah.
Do we think the anti-corruption have done well enough to inform the people of Sierra Leone on the status of those, be it institutions or individuals, according to the white paper recommendations for further investigation, Lawrence?
Now, the ACC has always put out a press release whenever whenever they have this out-of-court settlement payment stuff with individuals they are investigating for corruption-related offenses. With regards to the white paper, as I mentioned earlier, there were some individuals who have already engaged the Office of the Attorney General with a payment plan. And but the names of those individuals,
We don't know.
are concealed by the Office of the Attorney General, which is unfair to the members of the public. Again, as much as the ACC would readily put out press releases of whosoever has paid X amount of money, I think they should think about collating those names. I mean, let's have a database of all individuals who have paid or refunded, monies that deemed to have been stolen by them. But it does not stop with paying or refunding monies to the state.
That is not only coming now, where the government did a technical audit in about 4 or 5 sectors, and the government claimed about $1 billion.
No, that one was JJ Safa's figure.
And it's the government of Sierra Leone. And a date was set for those who were found guilty to pay back. And since that date, nothing has come up. So it still boils down to what Stella is asking about.
Let me tell you, in fact,
the state informed.
I drew the public's attention to individuals who were named in that technical audit report and are high-profile persons serving in this administration. Some of them happens to be very senior members of parliament, in fact. Yeah. So, like I said, the sincerity in the whole fight against corruption. But for me, I've always argued that somebody refunding money to the state implies a conviction of corruption outside the law. So the ACC should now take that person to court as much as the person has refunded. I think that should be even a strong evidence to show that indeed this person accepted or pleaded guilty outside the law, pleaded guilty to committing this act. The likes of the former NRA boss and others who paid over 3 billion loans, for example. That's a huge sum of money. A few weeks back, an individual who was prosecuted for bribing somebody 100,000 loans or soliciting a bribe of 100,000 loans was handed a prison sentence. You can imagine somebody soliciting bribe of 100,000 loans sent to prison. But those who stole billions and billions of loans can't pay back no more, can't pay back, they left you. And they'll have an opportunity to come back and pilfer the state.
Piggybacking on the question Samuel asked the Honorable here, is it safe to say that this whole campaign to fight corruption by the present administration was an election tool to get voted in by the people of Sierra Leone, and in present time, a tool to destabilize the opposition?
Corruption is always a very serious, or provokes a very serious debate when it comes to elections. Even after elections, I can tell you for a fact that the main opposition, APC, will want to use current, corruption allegations in their campaign running up to the 2023 elections. To say, the President Julius Maada Bio's administration is corrupt. Right. We have not, since independence, I can tell you, since independence, in my view, from all the books I've read about the history of Sierra Leone, what went wrong, how and why, we have not had a president that is sincere, honest, and patriotic to the people of this country. We not get it. And I don't think we will have such a man or a woman in the near future.
Right. Let's take a few messages, and we'll come to you guys for responses. Interesting. We have so many messages.
So many. All right, so let me, this one from Mystic Drizak says, the silence of the white paper outcome was proudly sponsored by the African Express publications on the massive misappropriation of public funds by the current administration. They pretend as if they are saints or were saints, but they are more dangerous.
Mike Joseph Kano is saying, I think it's the best time for government to give out press statement because no one has been found guilty until the court proves otherwise.
Ambassador Mike Joseph Kano says, this current administration should stand tall because corruption is fighting back in this current government, and a teach for just 100 was asked, probably a teacher for just 100 was asked to pay 15, for just 100,000, I think what you made reference to, was asked to pay 50 million leones or 5 years in prison, while these politicians can steal all kinds of money and go free.
Mohammed F.S. Kamara is saying, Samuel, my brother, this SLPP government is nothing but a deceptive government. How can they confiscate corrupt officials' properties when they themselves are indulging massive corruption? They will not come out with the COR recommendations now. They will wait a few months to elections. Then that's the time they will start implementing those recommendations as which on.
Gibson King says this government has made the fight against corruption more difficult, looking at how they are protecting themselves and how the ACC is reacting to issues of corruption.
Jabati Mambo is saying, if you listen to PLO Lumumba's lectures around the world, you will find out that Africa is still a shared continent amongst the Europeans. Slavery is still visible, my dear Stella and Samuel.
Paul P.J. Songa says, I think the ACC commissioner should be appointed by an independent committee. As long as the commissioner is a political appointment, we are never going to be able to fight corruption because the commissioner will always try and protect the interests of the government that appointed him. All this noise of ACC fighting corruption is all gimmicks.
At most, let's try and take at most 5 more messages. Mike Joseph Kanu is saying, Mr. Lawrence, I have read your write-ups about the attacks on the Auditor General. It's so sad. Why are these guys discrediting the Auditor General?
Okay. Jabati member says corruption will continue as long as we are not ready to change our mindset.
Asan JJ Yambo is saying, now I clearly accept the opinion of the media analyst. The government would have given right to the media houses to help us citizens to as well witness the appeals process.
Oh wow, a lot of messages.
So many
here.
messages.
Okay, so yeah, so Jabati, I think a continuation of that is saying that we lack honesty in dealing with our problems in Sierra Leone.
And the final message is from Warner Georgetown. Sierra Leoneans can clearly see how under the former the government you had austerity. You decided to change in the new direction, which is now known as the Grand Rail. Isn't this about time you see that these two parties are one and the same? Are you so gullible as to vote them into office come 2023? Can't you, for the first time in your life, keep them out and bring in change? You know the outcome if either comes in. All right,
final message from me is coming from James Cole, who says, how can the government seize properties of officials of the past regime because of corruption when under their watch there are so many corruption at play, but little or no effort to fighting it.
Right.
Some comments there, opinions of our viewers. I'm sure both of you would want to jump in.
Before you jump in, let's hold you there. Let's go for a news somewhere, and when we come back, you will respond and round up this conversation.
Right, welcome back. That was a summary of the top stories. We still have with us here Lawrence and Honorable Chidi discussing the deafening silence
of the white paper, exactly.
The deafening silence
on the implementation
of the implementations of the white paper. So quickly, as we round up, what would be your final thoughts on this issue?
Well, I will use the political lens some of these times. Sometimes this is something we put in the manifesto. We run towards the implementation. Let us have a national policy now. Like you have the medium term and the long term. So when the government comes, you say governance is continuity. But if you focus in some of these things to get votes, everybody is corrupt. And by the time you get to what you're looking at, don't forget that a process goes a long way in terms that you have to have documents. And if you make sure these things are falling within the ambit of the law, take care. But then when you start mixing politics in the implementation, then the gullible public is out there. The best politicians have two sides. They will tell you it's a witch hunt when they've committed the crime. So, and they have supporters out there. So that is why I said what the recommendation of the white paper now. Government will wait for the due process to take place, and then you start implementing. But then don't forget, what comes around goes around. So you've made it a policy now for accountability and transparency.
Right.
So which means when you have set that bar so high, make sure you do it. That is why I will never, you see, the government spent 2 years talking about corruption, and you have time to do your own work. Let the process take the course, and you concentrate in what you plan to do for the country. Right. That is why they're making that deafening silence.
Lawrence?
Anyways, what I want to advise is that the process has been somewhat slow, the appeals process especially, so I advise that they speed up the process, let the government accelerate the appeals process, give every aggrieved party a fair and equal opportunity to be heard, and let judgments emanating from the appeals court be conclusive. And we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where the process is delayed and very close to elections, government will start to say, oh, you were indicted in the COI, by the COI, and therefore you are not eligible to contest, blah, 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 and all of that stuff. It will create some form of chaos. We don't want that to happen. So we want the process to conclude as soon as possible, but my emphasis is on giving each and every party, aggrieved party, a fair and equal opportunity to be heard, to present its case, and let the appeals process itself be conclusive and final.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the conversation this morning. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you.